My younger brother took our parents to the favoring daughters over sons court. He claimed they favored Victoria and gave him a hard time. If he won, he'd be rich and live comfortably for life. Our parents would be erased from the world. Everyone was shocked. Couldn't you see the difference? Well, by favoring your daughter, now your son is upset, and you're screwed. But no one expected I'd step up to my claim. Our parents favor sons over daughters. Mom and Dad were dumbfounded. Everyone was. Mom couldn't stop pleading with Charles and tried to pull me down from the stand. She was sobbing, "Victoria, why are you doing this to yourself? You know how much we love you. Don't do this." Dad nodded, looking pained. "I don't want to bury my child." "Victoria, step down. We'll talk to Charles together." Dad tried to pull me down too, but I dodged him. I smirked at them, then looked at Charles, who stood beside me, looking smug. "Victoria, if you want to go down with them, be my guest. This is just me claiming what's rightfully mine." I laughed. "Perfect. I'll claim my justice too. Are you both sure? Once the trial starts, no one can intervene. The guilty will be immediately erased." I'm sure, Charles and I said in unison as we pressed the button. Our parents shouted in agony, "Victoria, you're insane." Seeing our parents so distraught made the onlookers furious. They blamed me. Look at Victoria's parents, risking their lives to save her. They love her so much, and yet she turned out so ungrateful. Charles's accusations I can understand, but Victoria, that's cruel. Her parents are known in the village for doting on her, and yet she claims they favor sons. Ridiculous. People say having sons ensures care in old age, and they aren't wrong. If only they favored Charles more, none of this would have happened. Victoria's just selfish and spoiled. Even a dog shows affection. Hearing this, Charles nodded, glaring at Mom and Dad. "You know how I've lived all these years, right? It's your fault. Why did I have to endure so much?" Our parents looked away, unable to reply. After a while, Mom cried, "Please, come back. There's still a chance to fix things. Just come back." "No way. You need to see how foolish you've been all these years. Begging me won't change a thing. Everything you owe me will be repaid." I nodded and clapped in agreement. Mom glared at me, then tried a stern approach. "Victoria, does this repay all the love we've given you? Your dad and I would die for you." I looked at them, as if heartbroken, but inside, I felt empty. Why do people always show favoritism? How can they stand there and say it's all for my sake? A cold, unfeeling trial voice echoed in my ears. 5 segments to review, starting with the first memory. This time, it was a banquet at Grandma's. Our parents took Charles and me to the gathering. Village banquets are lively but busy. Mom was working and glancing at us. My back's giving out. Wish someone would help. Charles stepped up, but she instantly rejected him, pushing him away. "You're just a boy, making things harder. What are you doing? Your sister's responsible, obedient, and a great cook. She's perfect for this." I saw Charles's hurt expression. I hesitated. "Mom, maybe let Charles help." "No way. He's better off watching TV, useless as he is." Mom scoffed at Charles, then praised me, "Unlike our Victoria, who'll have no trouble finding a husband. Let him wait for dinner, useless thing." I loved our Victoria the most. The video paused here. Charles, more agitated, faced the audience. "See, this is the environment I grew up in. Always praising Victoria, always putting me down." But the judge said, "I declare the favoring sons over daughters is true." "See, I told you they favored sons over daughters." Charles stopped, shocked. He raised his voice. "Are the systems broken? This is clearly daughter favoritism." He was furious, shouting at me, "Victoria, did you pay to rig the trial? You shameless things," including our parents in his rant. Mom clutched her heart in distress. But revealing the truth now wasn't an option, so her eyes welled up. "Charles, Mom loves you." Even the audience grew displeased, mocking, thought this court was unbiased, and yet, how did Victoria pull this off? Everyone saw it. Even the judge is spouting nonsense. They're obviously belittling the son and praising the daughter. How's this favoring sons over daughters? Wait, the first video isn't over. Maybe there's a twist. I doubt it. They clearly pamper Victoria. No twist possible, I bet. Murmurs filled the room. The video resumed. Mom asked me to cook up all the leftovers, but she couldn't trust me completely. So she brought over a little stool and stayed right there next to me. I was sweating bullets. My arms were so tired I could barely lift them. Stirring, plating, my hands didn't stop. Mom didn't let up, urging, "Victoria, hurry up. It'll be bad news if you delay the guest's meal. You're not used to hard work, that's why you're so clumsy. I'm doing this for your own good. A lazy girl won't find a husband." Then she glared at Charles, who was gobbling down jelly made by Grandma, and gave him a swift kick. "Who said you could eat that? Put it down." All those jellies are for your sister. Charles started bawling. Dad couldn't stand it. Let the kid have some if he wants. Mom just pouted, unmoved. I thought she was feeling sorry for me. That's why she acted like that towards Charles. I walked over, setting aside what I was doing, and handed him the jelly. I wiped my sweat, grinned sheepishly. You can have it all. Your sister doesn't need any. Then out of nowhere, Mom slapped me across the face, leaving me stunned. I couldn't figure out what I said wrong to deserve that, and she didn't explain. She just cried. Late at night, Dad spoke softly to Mom. She should be doing the chores, that girl. Why take the boys jelly to feed her? Didn't you see how much our son cried? Dad was all frustrated, spitting as he talked, face flushed with disappointment. Mom chuckled awkwardly. All that jelly's gone moldy in the cellar. Charles might get an upset stomach if he eats it. That stubborn girl can have it all. Then she should be grateful to me. Besides, today I noticed Charles wanting to help me. How could such chores be for a little kid? They're just right for Victoria. Dad laughed in agreement. Still, you have a way of handling things. Charles is gonna do big things one day. But I'm only 2 years older than Charles. The first memory ended there, and everyone exchanged glances. Charles was shocked too. He tugged at Mom's sleeve. That's not how it happened. You favored Victoria, that's why I couldn't have the jelly. I'll remember this forever. You kept me from working, because you didn't want me around. Mom stayed silent, looking pained. I smiled, tears in my eyes, but it didn't really matter. Maybe Mom and Dad just loved their daughter a bit more than everyone thought. Girls are naturally better at household chores, cooking and cleaning. We're not from a wealthy family, so no princess treatment. It's just how it is. I agreed. The earlier you learn about life's hardships, the better you'll do later. I mean, what's there to complain about when your parents give you food, clothes, and a roof? Nowadays, doesn't every woman do housework? In our family, women do the chores, men earn the money. Victoria's probably making too big of a deal out of it. It was just expired jelly, nothing life-threatening. No reason to count every penny. There's a problem with the judgment here. Making a big fuss over nothing, implying favoritism. Quiet. The next memory rewind starts. Everyone can have opinions, but no rule breaking. With the judge's voice, everyone quieted down. This time, it was about Charles wanting money for a school trip. Charles asked Mom for $2,000. Mom rolled her eyes and sighed. No money from me. Your sister has some. Didn't she earn money from her part-time job recently? Charles heard that and rushed to ask me for cash. I refused, but he was assertive. He kicked me hard in the stomach. He took my money and ran. I clutched my stomach, sweating from the pain. Mom seemed worried, but only said a few meaningless words. Clapping her hands, she said carelessly, Victoria, since you made some money, you should treat us to a trip. Your dad and I haven't enjoyed much in life. They say daughters are more filial. I hope I'm lucky enough for that. So off we went on a trip to Tibet. Upon arrival, I found out the three of them flew in, while I took a 40-hour train ride to save money. Dad said, I know you still have money, Victoria. Spend yours first, then Mom and I will pitch in. But my money went into this trip. When we got there, Charles struggled with altitude sickness. Without asking, my parents opened my suitcase and took out all my oxygen bottles for Charles. Not a one left for me. They locked their own in a drawer, calling them lifesavers. Glaring at me, when I finally needed it, there was nothing left. Immediately dizzy and weak, I begged for a loan of oxygen, clutching my chest, nearly passed out from lack of air. Mom ignored me. Dad faked alarm, pretending to call an ambulance. Meanwhile, they pulled Charles back several steps, watching me suffer on the floor. Thankfully, a kind stranger gave me oxygen and saved me. I wiped my tears, wanting to know why they treated me this way. But Mom coldly said, you didn't prepare extra oxygen. You're young. You won't die from some mild hypoxia. It was to build your problem-solving skills. If something happens when we're not around, you're gonna have to rely on others. Mom sneered, her eyes cold and sharp. I'm doing this for you, and you don't appreciate it. We raise you. This is how you repay us. You seemed fine, right? I don't know why I bothered raising an ungrateful child like you. I silently cried, began avoiding them altogether. To ease tension, Dad suggested we treat me by dining out with Charles. But before I arrived, Charles devoured all the meat on the table. Mom smirked. I know you don't like meat, so that's why it's for Charles. We ordered cabbage and broccoli for you, your favorites. Charles nodded, munching on a chicken leg, mouth greasy, looking at me discontentedly. You only favor my sister, not even knowing what I like. Always giving me the leftovers she doesn't want. I stayed silent. Rage began simmering inside me. Mom always complains about being broke. saying how hard it is for dad to make money and the stress of raising 2 kids. So at school, pickled veggies and rice become my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I even have to save half of my monthly allowance to give to mom. But do they really think I don't like eating meat? Did they ever ask me who said I didn't like meat? Mom was caught off guard by my remark and gave me a sharp look. If you love eating it, go ahead. There's some minced meat on the table left, she said. You should have stated earlier that you love meat. When did we ever mistreat you? Dad glanced at me sideways, saying, I remember you earned from your part-time job. Why not buy yourself a dish? Stop being so calculative. We've bought you clothes as gifts. How ungrateful you are. Then Dad pulled out a black bag. Mom, beaming with pride, said, see how good we are to you. We got you 2 pieces and just 1 for Charles. She revealed Charles's clothes with the bright brand logo on them, while mine were from a street vendor. I never noticed it at school. Now, I suddenly feel like Mom and Dad say they're being fair to me, yet somehow it doesn't feel that way. Charles, with a pout, said, what you bought isn't even what I like. You all are a family. I'm always just second to my sister. The video cut off there, leaving Charles dazed. From his memories, he believed Mom and Dad favor me. Why does it seem opposite from an outsider's view? Some clarity dawns on folks around. Their glances toward my parents are now laced with a bit of disdain. The facade of them doting on their daughter crumbles, saying the daughter should be filial while giving the best to the son. These are parents who've been manipulating their daughter at every turn. I see no issue with calling this gender bias. Look at Charles' face turning blue. How dull can someone be? His parents treat him so well, yet he recalls only being gifted branded clothes, while his sister got cheap ones from the market. Severe lack of awareness is harmful. How a mother could say, no one died, right, when her son doesn't even have an oxygen bottle during high-altitude sickness. Did he have to use his sister's? Dad cleared his throat. You can't entirely blame my wife, can you? We love both our kids equally. In times of emergency, who knows whose oxygen bottle was grabbed? If you stay silent, no one would think you're mute. Fairness is not just hiding in the shadows. Dad's face turned white. He stayed quiet. Someone commented they found no need for prior harshness, pointing out Victoria turned out fine regardless. Victoria's mom said at the time it was to test the daughter's ability to improvise, saying it was for her good. The crowd had mixed opinions. The officer's voice sounded again, quiet, now playing the third memory replay. This time, it was the day both Charles and I were going to high school. Charles didn't have great grades, so Mom pulled some strings to get him into a private school. It was far from home. Mom looked at me with furrowed brows. You'll go to a boarding school, Victoria. It's beneficial for your studies with more time to review subjects. I hesitated, not wanting to stay half a semester in an unfamiliar place. I thought of Charles. What about Charles, Mom? I asked. Mom paused, then kept walking. His grades aren't going to skyrocket anyway, so no pressure on him to be a star student. But you, things are different. You should aim to make Mom proud. Hearing that made my urge to return home fade a bit. I kept telling myself it was all for education. Little did I know how costly everything in a boarding school would be. Mom widened her eyes, exclaiming, are you robbing us? My daughter is a top student. Shouldn't everything be free for her, even giving her money? She demanded the principal be brought over to discuss this. I felt peers staring mockingly, feeling restless and uneasy. In a school full of top achievers, my grades felt like they belonged to a frog in a well. I tried stopping Mom, but she firmly pushed my hand away, blaming me sternly. Why so spineless? We're standing for our rights. Why should a mediocre high school cost us this much? Someone shouted impatiently at Mom, saying I could attend a regular high school. No way, Mom blurted out reflexively. Looking at me, she added, Victoria, you must give your all in studies. Mom pins her hopes on you. I can work extra to earn more money. It's not a problem. I was moved, held back from leaving. I nodded solemnly. Then the officer announced, guilty of gender bias, confirmed. Are you crazy or am I? Just cause I'm mindful of money, it's gender bias. Ridiculous. Sending a kid to boarding school for studies is wrong, huh? Isn't this stand supposed to be about fairness? Why don't I see it? Silence. The video hasn't ended. Everyone hushed and continued to watch. Once at home, for Charles' pleasant start to the school term, Mom ordered Dad to buy lobster. Dad slyly whispered, Victoria didn't come home, did she? I didn't buy for her. Too pricey, you know. No worries, I handle this. Later, give Charles his monthly allowance. Everywhere needs spending, for a boy at school. Dad nodded, you got it right. Charles's private school is far. I even got him a school bus card. Worth it, hoping he sees what we do for him, Mom declared. From then on, my room became Charles's basketball room. A house I returned to only twice a year now felt so strange. I protested before. I didn't want my room to become Charles's storage room. Dad argued, why create such fuss? You come home just to argue. Better if you don't. Mom laid out 2 tables of cabbage and minced meat, looking sharply. Always riling your dad up. Here's meat. Now don't say we never give you meat. Never acknowledged our care. I quietly finished my meal, but the scene switched to the kitchen, with a full bowl of steamed egg and pork rounds saved for Charles. A note, have fun, remember to eat, son. The video ended, leaving everyone in disbelief. How can these parents act so two-faced? Weren't they supposed to spoil their daughter? If this is what they call spoiling, I'm dying of laughter. They are so scared their daughter would eat an expensive lobster and take advantage of them. Playing dead, aren't they? And that Charles, enjoying all the benefits, now claims his parents prefer girls over boys. If I hadn't seen the truth, I'd have been fooled by them too. Charles panicked, holding his head, repeatedly saying, it's not like this. It's not like this. Then suddenly, he wanted to leap off the stage and run out, but he was stopped by a guard on either side and taken back on stage. Once a trial starts, no one is allowed to leave halfway. Why? You're restricting my freedom. I'm going to complain about you. Charles cursed, but the guards paid him no mind, staring straight ahead. His parents looked frightened. They knew they were in trouble now. His mother was a mess of tears, looking at me. Victoria, think of something. Are you going to ruin us over this little thing? You heartless child. Dad chimed in angrily. If I'd known it'd come to this, I'd have let your mom get rid of you in the womb. You've truly disappointed me. You're worse than an animal. I hadn't even spoken yet, but the audience wasn't buying it one bit. Look at you, and you're disappointed. Why not say Victoria is disappointed in you? A daughter isn't a possession. She's a living person who deserves equal treatment. But I think this isn't a reason to die for. No need to go this far. Someone added, I think Victoria's pretty scary, if she's really going to kill her parents with this. Don't judge without knowing all the facts. Everything in life has a reason, and karma catches up, someone else said. Now streaming the 4th memory replay. Reminder, no one leaves during playback. Violators will face immediate consequences. The judge appeared again, voice commanding. This time, it covered Charles discussing his new girlfriend. He wanted to marry her, but the girlfriend asked for $50,000. His mom agreed eagerly, saying how wonderful the in-laws were. But when they got home, her face darkened immediately. She sat on the ground crying and wailing. This is the end of me. They think their daughter is the prize. Are they trying to kill me? Watching his sister have savings to buy a house while he couldn't even settle down was too much for her. She could only tell me. I stayed silent. Mom yelled dramatically, got up, and began cursing. Our children are no good. Ungrateful wolves. I thought that would be the end of it. But little did I know, my parents sneaked away with my savings and registration papers at night. In the morning, everything was gone. Messages kept pinging about charges from my account. I froze in place. When I confronted them, Dad's face soured, crashing dishes on the table. He slapped me across the face. You eat, live, and spend my money. After all these years, I gave you too much respect. And now you're accusing your own parents of stealing. I chuckled dryly. I'll report it to the police. The transactions will tell the truth. The tough-talking mom spat at me. You brat, always suspecting this and that. So what if family took it? What's yours is ours. After raising you, we can't spend a little money. Words were pointless. I had my card voided the same day. Mom couldn't do a thing, glaring at me with disdain. She crossed her arms. Some people, so young and already with tens of thousands in savings. Where do they even get such money from men? All common sense and shame are gone. I paused my steps. Which eye saw me getting money from hookups? Mom glared, yelling louder. How dare you speak to me that way? Making money isn't easy. Otherwise, why hasn't your brother found a job yet? Deep down, you know where that money came from, and it's shameful to say it. Ranting, she picked up a stool and smashed it, still angry. Ungrateful wretch. We raised you this big. Do you know how much you owe us? You'll pay back every penny. Holding back tears, I ran out the door. In the family group chat, Mom proclaimed, Victoria, your dad and I didn't treat you poorly. Now to earn, you're kissing up to people. What's the use of that dirty money? You'd be better off, like your brother, working hard, and finding a proper job. Everyone knew how insulting that was, calling their daughter a mistress, shameless. While Charles stayed at home gaming, she painted him as diligently job hunting. They would not let me go. Early on, I rented a place outside and occasionally visited home, everyone knew. But that night, after Mom's declaration, a few relatives dragged their daughters over, smirking. Said they wanted their girls to hang out with me. It wouldn't matter what they do. A woman patted the girl's face beside her. She'll grow perfect. Follow you for a year or so. Should earn nicely. Don't worry, Victoria, we won't mind. The man puffed on a big cigar, eyeing me sinisterly. She looks good. Must make decent money out there. She'll be fine under you. I was instantly furious. I threw everything I had at him. Get out. I do legit work. You won't push your daughters into that for money. Do you have no conscience? How young are they? You people have no shame. The man became infuriated, throwing his cigarette, but spitting saliva all around. You're the ungrateful one. Didn't your mom tell you what I used to do? He rolled up his sleeves, ready to hit me. Without thinking, I rushed inside, locked the door and windows. With the door banging violently, my heart pounded. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but I had no one to rely on. I called the police. Quieter now, the banging stopped, and sirens blared. I felt rescued. At the police station, the man was suddenly much more docile. Dad swung his arm again, cursing, "That's my brother. Who gave you the right to talk to elders like that? Go tell the police it was all a misunderstanding, right now." I dodged and looked at him coldly. "So, you're saying it's fine to call me a mistress? This man wants to sell his own daughter into that line of work. He deserves to be in jail." "Dad, you always said you favored daughters over sons. But did you really mean it?" The video ended there, leaving everyone to take a deep breath, their faces uneasy. It's the first time I've seen parents cursing their daughter for being a mistress and kissing up to someone. Anyone can see what it means. I can't understand how, in the 21st century, there are still parents like this. Mom and Dad were visibly embarrassed. Mom stiffened her neck and explained. Victoria never explained herself. How could I not misunderstand? Where would a girl get such ability to make so much in a year? Dad was still staring in silence, angry, but too scared to speak. Charles panicked, seeing things taking a turn he didn't expect. He hurried to clarify, "This has nothing to do with me. I didn't harm Victoria. I shouldn't die. If anyone should, it's them." Mom and Dad were shocked, staring at Charles helplessly. They hadn't expected their precious son to so casually say they should die. Everyone was speechless. "Whether you live or die has nothing to do with Victoria. You're the one who accused your parents of favoring daughters over sons. Did you forget that?" Mom wailed, "Son, all we've done is for you. How could you say this to us? Everything we've done all these years was for your sake." When Mom said that, I remembered. Charles was a disaster at college entrance exams, falling short by 300 points. Mom spent all her savings to buy him a diploma from a school. She was so proud, always saying her son was promising and good at studying. The only grand family banquet was for her precious son. "It's in the name of making up for not celebrating when I got into a good college," she said, hosting it with Charles's college banquet. I, the main character, was completely oblivious to this. Relatives even said I was having a tantrum. Thinking about this made me smile even more. Mom and Dad, I hope after this fifth memory ends, you'll still claim you favor daughters over sons. The voice of the judge echoed again. The fifth memory begins. If guilty, the guilty will be immediately erased. This video filled me with a massive hatred. This time, it was Mom who apologized and invited me home for dinner. Grandma was there too, looking at me with cloudy eyes yet a faint gleam. "Victoria's home, and she's grown up so well," Grandma commented. For some reason, when she spoke, I felt a shiver down my spine. Mom glared at me, annoyed. "Come and greet your grandma. Why do you get more stupid as you grow?" I shuddered, but Grandma was lost in thought. "Did you know you had a sister?" I was taken aback. "She died soon after birth. A master said you'd bring prosperity to the home, so they didn't abort you." I wanted to ask more, but Mom called me over to eat. Everyone looked at me with such a strange gaze that it made my skin crawl. Mom placed a piece of fish head in my bowl. "Eat up." Sadly, after eating, I passed out completely. My hands were bound tightly in the woodshed at home. Mom was sharpening a knife not far away, with a big bucket and a smaller one next to her. When she saw me awake, she smiled, curious. "That smaller bucket is the one they used to drown your sister. Girls are worthless. Drowning her was better to have another child. Victoria, our village has a master who specializes in this. Girls who die with resentment might become ghosts. So, your dad and I threw your sister's corpse on the road to get run over 100 times. That way, her soul shattered and couldn't become a ghost." I didn't understand why she was telling me this. Thinking deeply scared me, and it filled me with fear. Mom tilted her head. "Do you want to try it?" I desperately tried to scream, but fabric muffled my mouth. She continued, "The master said you bring wealth, that's why I kept you. But years have passed, and we're still so poor. Mom's got no choice but to put you in the barrel to bring luck to the family." In that moment, my world spun. I wanted to roar, to question why she treated me this way. Mom seemed to read my mind, shaking her head with a sigh. "The master said you jinxed your brother. Otherwise, he'd be a CEO by now. For Charles's sake, you must die too." Mom spoke ruthlessly. I felt a chill, realizing that look Grandma gave me It was sympathy, regret, and a hint of disgust. Mom forced more unknown drugs down my throat. In a daze, someone pulled my hair back sharply. A needle was injected into my arm, blood dripping down. A heavy stick struck the back of my head with a crisp sound. In an instant, I felt intense pain, but I couldn't wake up. Dad whispered, "Don't kill her yet. Drowning is the first step for gathering luck." "Don't worry," Mom replied. "This kid is tough. She won't die. I'm just making her behave." I was terrified, wanting to scream, to call for help. My mind was crystal clear, but I couldn't wake up. I even heard Charles casually asking about me after the parents left. They chuckled, telling him, "Your sister said she'd sacrifice herself to bring fortune and invite the god of wealth home. Don't worry about it." That sounds good. After being favored for so many years, it's time for her to contribute. Charles agreed, assuming my voluntary sacrifice. When I opened my eyes again, Mom and Dad untied me, convinced I couldn't move anymore. Pain radiated from the back of my head relentlessly. The water quickly rose above my head, turning my face blue as I choked on bubbles. Dad gave me a long hard look and muttered, "Everyone has their fate. Victoria, live a better life in your next one." His gaze was so cold, making my skin crawl. In that moment, Mom was no different from an executioner, ready to take her own daughter's life again. They left again, because, to get results, they'd have to drown me first. But the moment they left, I stood up, ignoring my trembling legs. There was a bloody hole in my head, dark and crusted over with a brown scab, the blood long dried. It seemed like an artery in my hand was injured, with only a bit of blood trickling out. I wiped the grime off myself casually, and ran toward the other side of the mountain. All I could be grateful for was growing up here. So I made it to a cave. I let insects crawl all over me and hid among the wild beasts for 3 days straight. I thought of calling the police, but I had no evidence. I was even more afraid they'd catch me first. Then I remembered the tribunal. They didn't expect, right after their own son's sudden accusation, I'd show up on stage 2. The charge, preferring sons over daughters. The 5th memory replay was over. The judge announced the final verdict. Charles, charge of preferring daughters over sons, dismissed. Victoria, charge of preferring sons over daughters, confirmed. The crowd was buzzing with comments. This meant the fate of Mom, Dad, and Charles was sealed. In all these years, I'd never heard of such a vicious way to harm someone. How could these parents be so biased they'd go across the Pacific with it? This isn't just playing favorites. Calling it psychotic murder is an understatement. And they already had a daughter they lost this way. It's terrifying. We need to get rid of these evil folks. Don't you have nightmares about this? Trying to kill your own daughters. Such shameless people. Why not use yourselves for good luck then? Dad and Mom were pale, their words powerless against the accusations. But he wouldn't give up. Couldn't accept it. How can a flimsy trial decide my fate? I'm the boss. She's my daughter, and if I want her gone, she must be. What a conceited attitude. Furious audience members spat at him. Shameless. Mom shielded Dad, grumbling, "Why are you all treating my man like this? Victoria's not a good person anyway. I did it all for the family's future. Is it so bad for her to sacrifice for everyone's benefit?" Mom mumbled, dissatisfied. She even yelled at the collapsed Charles to get up. Heaven sees what people do. We're not afraid of them. If Victoria wants to kill her parents, she'll face retribution. Charles ignored her, his emotions shattered. No one expected Dad to shove Mom away the next moment. Looking around in despair. "Judge, where are you?" This was all her idea. I just knew about it, that's all. If anyone should go, it's her. Mom was stunned, her lip ashen, eyes welling with tears. "You're nothing but a coward." I watched this pathetic back and forth. It was honestly hilarious. I parted my hair to show them their handiwork more clearly. "If you'd hit harder, maybe I'd be dead already." I chuckled, realizing what it's like to be nearly killed by your own parents. A truly unfortunate family life, I know all too well. "Victoria, stop playing the victim. You're still alive, aren't you?" Mom glared at me angrily. "If we really get wiped out, you'll be an orphan. Have you no heart, wanting to kill your own parents?" I didn't look at her. I silently prayed to a higher power that if I ever faced retribution, let it be today. If given a second chance, I hoped justice would reach those guilty. The prayer ended, and the judge's voice returned. The countdown to erasure began. No. In their terrified screams, they vanished. Everyone was stunned, watching in shock, unable to move on for a long time. I took a deep breath and left slowly. Even with the mist ahead, I believed storms were usual, but sunshine would eventually come.